It is the Practical Prayer Podcast pre-show on the New Thought Media Network. I am Bill Marchiony in Pennsylvania. That's Carol Lawrence over there in Jersey. And in mere moments, we're going to be recording another episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast. And y'all on New Thought Media Network gets to play along and participate. And when I say participate, if you want to, you can put a comment into the comments. Question or prayer request and so forth, and we would be happy to address it and incorporate that into the program. If you're watching the recording, you can always go to bethelight.com, which is over there underneath Carol, b-the-light.com, and there's a section for the
I think we're frozen.
Practical Prayer Podcast. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's none of my business. A little glitch on the platform. I'm just going to keep my hands away from the machinery. And yeah, so this is episode number 178. And I'm looking forward to the topic because it's the sort of thing that... and I keep on learning stuff about New Thought, mostly in the perspective of other religions. Because I grew up and ran away from other religions when I was really young, so I was never steeped in them. Mm-hmm. It was like before the tea started to seep, I ran off. So,
lucky you.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff made me tilt my head and I go, really? Why would that be? So I never got the level of indoctrination that a lot of people do. So I don't have, and that's one of the things I've learned, one of the big things I've learned from Carol is I have much less to unlearn than most people do.
It makes a difference.
Yeah, there's stuff that's a big deal. It's not a big deal to me.
Yeah, and maybe we should talk about, make an episode on the big deal.
The big
because
deal.
It really, yeah, because it's a big challenge. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a way to do it, of course, but it's different for everybody.
Well, I mean, there's some surprises that I had growing up. Like I was always very creative, clever. I did shows and magic shows and puppet shows and would write things and recording and all sorts of fun, creative stuff like that. And I was also very technical, good in the workshop and electronics and all the rest of that. And it never occurred to me that some people were good at one but not the other. Mm. But the people who are good at technology and good at creativity, really small group. That's a really small bunch of people. So, and it took a long time to realize that, oh, wait a second, I'm bilingual here.
Yeah.
And then I can do both of them. But yeah, so that was one of those things where it was just so obvious to me that it didn't occur to me that it was a big deal for other people.
Hmm. I like that bilingual. I think I'm going for that.
Ignorant in two languages. That's me.
New Thought and traditional.
Yeah.
Traditional religion. I like that.
Yeah. So let's. I'm now eager to go ahead and record an episode of the podcast. So shall we go ahead and get started? Because I want to get into this.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
All right. On your mark, get set.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
Heaven and hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just excited about the topic for today. Hey, it's good to be back with you. This is episode number 178. of the Practical Prayer Podcast. And you keep on coming up with topics, and I'm always surprised because I think that they're obvious, and they're not.
Yeah, but you just explained that, it's because you fell off before what did you say, the tea steeped?
Oh yeah, I was like just barely 12 when I ran away from the traditional religion, as you call it, because I was about to get confirmed into my little Protestant church, and I said to my parents, I don't believe this. I don't believe enough of it to stand in front of the congregation and say, yeah, this is what I believe. And they said, okay. And I thought, I just told you that I'm going to stop doing something you've had me doing for 12 years on a weekly basis, and you're just okay? Where are my real parents?
But but do you know how big that is?
Yeah,
first of all, to
now
be
I
able
do.
to know that this is not cool for you, and you say it to your parent. Now, I would have never been able to say it. If I said that, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So no, that you would be able to say it to them was one thing, and then for them to say okay, that's big.
Yeah, and there was, the whole backstory that I did not know anything about for another 40 years beyond that, about why it was okay to run away from your religion, at least as far as my mother was concerned, because
Okay.
she grew up in Hamburg, Germany, and at age 8 in 1939, yes, you're doing the arithmetic there, she and her previously Jewish family left Germany.
Okay.
And she was then my Sunday school teacher at the Protestant church. So running away from religions was something that's perhaps a family trait. So anyway, you wanted to talk about heaven and hell.
Yes.
So talk about heaven and hell, and that will give me something to lean my foot into and push against.
Okay, so it feels like a contrived concept, both of them, to like a carrot to make you to design your behavior, to indoctrinate you, or as Don Miguel Ruiz talks about, domesticate you in
Yep.
that way. And then the real and I take exception to both anytime that you're artificially doing something to someone or coercing them. To me, it's a denial of their freedom. But the one I find particularly offensive is hell, because you're trying to scare people into doing what you want and then not allowing them the freedom to question it. I think that's a whole big problem. But to just come out and say that, it's also not received very well. So there's a lot of fear going on there, and fear of freedom. And that's another thing, it's a conversation for another time, but that's a really big deal to me, that you are not free to even think and make your own decisions based on some, like some stuff that's been put into your subconscious mind, blah, blah, blah. So, there it is.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to suggest that there are actually 3 different aspects of heaven and hell. And since the heaven and hell are 2 different aspects, maybe there's 6 different things, but we're going to go with the 3 different aspects of heaven and hell. What is heaven and hell? Or what is heaven and what is hell? And that's the first question. And then why would you go or be sent to or find yourself in heaven or hell? And the third piece of it is, who's to decide when you're going? And the actual what is heaven and what is hell part, that's the easy one. So you want to start on the easy one and work towards the more difficult one, or you want to go the other way around?
Let's start with the easy one.
Okay. There's the delicious, delightful, wonderful description of what heaven is. The blissful place where everything fits together. It's harmonious and peaceful and tranquil, and there are no problems or difficulties or challenges. There's no strife. There's no conflict. It's just lovely. Heaven is just lovely. Everything is working just perfectly. And we've all had an experience very much like that at some point in our lives. Some people more often than others, but everybody's had a heaven-like experience where everything is just fitting together perfectly. Oh man, this is the best day ever. I'm with my friends. I'm doing stuff that I enjoy doing. The weather is perfect. The afternoon is lingering on. This is as good as it gets. And as I'm saying that, everybody who's listening to this has a different idea of that heavenly experience. Mm-hmm. But we've all had it. And, I mean, my joke is that, of course, hell exists. I've been to the DMV on a Saturday to get my driver's license renewed. And we've all had the experience of things are just not working properly. There's loss that's going on left and right. There are people who are ill or dying. There's things that are being taken away. There's injustices being perpetrated. And it's horrible. It's what happens to us in a really bad nightmare that all we want to do is wake up from it. And it's all the bad stuff is happening. And we've had that experience in life. Mm-hmm. So we've all been to hell too. So the interesting part is that heaven and hell are not things that happen when we die. So there's a story. And there's a story that people tell us that, heaven is a place that's like all those heavenly things that you've experienced already. And hell is a place where it's just all those hellish things that you've already experienced. And it happens all the time. And you get assigned to one or the other forever. Mm-hmm. So it's very judgmental. It's a reward or punishment-based thing. And you don't really have any idea how you're going to get there. So the destinations, the actual experience of heaven and hell, we've all had them. So the question is there a heaven and a hell after we die? I don't know. Nobody's ever come back and told us. That's kind of the magic about dying. Nobody comes back with a story. So it's just mysterious. And perhaps that's because it's none of our business.
That's it?
That it's none of our business? We're here to be here.
Yes.
If there's stuff that goes on beyond when we're here, and we don't know what it is, then it's probably because we don't need to know what it is.
Okay, so is this the end of it's the end of the podcast?
Oh no, we haven't gotten to the third part yet, which is about the people who are willing to tell you which one you're going to, and why.
Okay, so I was listening to you describe both, and of course you were describing experiences in terms of states of mind and conditions and so forth, which are not permanent. They could repeat, but they're not permanent. But when you talk about heaven and hell, people think of, in the traditional side, of course, they think of a place, a physical place that you're going to, and that determines a lot of a person's perspective in terms of how they live and what they believe in, and just the principles and values by which they live are based on where you're going to go after you leave here.
Yep.
And, the logic to me is, okay, now we're talking about a physical location. Where exactly is this now? So when you ask that question, you're in trouble now because you've asked the question that doesn't have an answer. But it's surprising that that's enough to just say this is where you are going. The logic of there not being, that you're not able to point out a geography it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's a place and you don't want to be there. And so I'm thinking, I don't like mind games.
You were a pastor for 35 years? Okay.
Yeah, but there were certain things I did not touch.
Right.
As
yeah,
a pastor.
As a pastor, you didn't play the mind games particularly.
No, because first of all, it's a matter of integrity. So if I didn't believe it, I didn't talk about it until I could either believe it or, but if I was secure and I didn't believe it, it was a whole lot more you could preach about. And nobody's ever going to ask you, except a couple people would get annoyed that I wouldn't condemn people to hell. But then it doesn't I mean, if I do that, I mean, I could give you a fire and brimstone sermon if you want it, but then how am I going to get out the door with you asking me all these questions? And I'd have to say, listen, it was all. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said all that.
Yeah, I was just pulling a number 7 on you. We have to. Every once in a while, I need to do a number 7.
What
The
is
boss
that?
told, whatever. That's the fire and brimstone. You're going to go to hell if you don't behave yourself. Talk. I mean, I've just made up the 7. Interestingly, as we're talking about this, most people are not concerned about heaven. Most people are concerned about hell. So it's not like you necessarily want to go to heaven, but if you're going to heaven, that means you're not going to hell. And the big thing is not going to hell. Because hell is visceral, with the fire and the pain and the agony and screaming for eternity. That's very evocative. It's got some some juice.
Some juice.
Well, people can resonate with that, and you ask somebody to describe what hell is like, and they're going to give you a very detailed description of what hell is and why it's awful and why they don't want to go there. You ask somebody about heaven, it's much more vague. Oh, well, it's clouds and everybody is polite, and angels are playing harps, and then you casually ask, do you like harp music? Well, no. For eternity then? Okay. Why are you volunteering for that?
It's not a good control thing. Heaven, it doesn't work that well in terms of controlling people, because
Right.
if you go to heaven, it's like, I'm not going to hell.
Right. It's and so perhaps the term should be, you're either going to go to hell or not hell. But there's 2 doors, so we labeled the not hell door heaven. It's like, okay, so phew. You got to quit it. There's a not guilty verdict.
Yeah, it's kind of a starting place for me, because as we're speaking of it and I'm remembering things, I'm getting a bit unhappy, I'm feeling the unhappiness, because people don't question because they've been taught not to question. It's not a welcome thing. And again, how are you supposed to use the term elevate in your consciousness if you can't question? If you don't feel comfortable in questioning. And then if you can muster up the courage to question, now you've got to deal with, the answer that you get, which is very much different than what you're accustomed to. And it's just really hard. The word deconstruction came to my attention about a year or so ago, and I shied away from it because it sounded so uninviting. I understand what you mean, but it's tough enough to have to deal with changing your mindset about something and reconsidering all that you have to go through without using the term deconstruction. It sounds almost like construction work on the highway. And and then there was,
it sounds like there's jackhammers involved.
Yeah, and then there's also the historical image that it brings. But after I thought about it, there really isn't any other word for it. There's no other way to deal with it other than that. And I want to feel like if you're going to go into something like a deconstruction of your belief, and you're going to deal with the heavyweights like heaven and hell, at least be able to trust the one that's talking to you, that they're being honest.
Right.
And that's a lot to ask these days. It is, because it's easier to not deal with something than to be honest about it.
Yep.
And then what happens? Yeah.
Yeah, so you've made my mind go in different directions now. I'm wondering which one to go in. One of them is where we started, which is who says, whether you're going to heaven or hell. And we'll save that one for just a minute. And the other is this notion of deconstructing, which is really important. My wife is into those the real estate shows, where you're going to get the house rehabbed and decide whether you're going to keep it or not. And invariably, the remodeling team goes into the 100-year-old house, and they start fixing the basement, and oh, look at that, there's water outside of here, and there's rotten stuff over there, and the people 50 years ago who put in the electrical wiring didn't really use electrical wiring rules. And that's what we're doing, is we're taking off the veneer. We're pulling off the wallboard. We're looking at the foundation. We're seeing what's actually there. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't know what is in our belief system, what's in our structure, we're going to keep on living with whatever the problem is. Oh, this house is wonderful. We just repainted. It still smells like mold, but it's a lovely house. It's like, no, it's a moldy house with a pet fresh coat of paint. And you need to do some deconstruction so that you can actually be aware of where you're living. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's just my thought. So deconstruction sounds very technical, but it's actually about understanding who you are and what you're bringing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's not inviting, and I think also it has other implications and in our social memory. But if you get past all that, it's like, how important is it to you to understand beyond where you are right now? And there are these words like metaphysical that sound really like 2 miles wide. And you say, well, that's deep. And, it's got, no, I don't think, because it's too mystical. Listen, let's not even go there. It's just seeing beyond. Let's just look at it like we're taking another point of view. And it's almost like you have to make it a palatable, okay thing to consider. And my thing is, if it's not working for you, look at something else. You don't have to change. Mm-hmm. But if heaven and hell, so here's the thing. If you've gotten to the place where you don't believe in heaven and hell, but you don't have anything else to work with, then you're just kind of hanging out there. You don't want to hang out there. That's not what you want. So, yeah. So that's why I thought we could get a real sense of what heaven is and what hell is and how it's used. And, once you see what something's there for, then it's like, okay, I don't really want this to be a part of my world. The alternative is what?
The alternative. The alternative is what? And let's take a break, and then talk about who's telling us whether we're going to heaven or hell, and what the alternative is.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marchiony's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the new thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. This is good.
We're having a conversation about heaven and hell, and we're up to the third topic, which is not, is heaven or hell good or bad? What is it? But is more along the lines of who decides whether you're going to heaven or hell. And those are the rules and the controls, and we've already talked about the fact that hell gets a lot more mind share than heaven. Heaven is what we get to go to if we don't go to hell, and we really want to avoid hell. So going to heaven is the not hell destination. And historically, in traditional religion, there is a lot of emphasis on who gets to tell you what the behaviors are that are acceptable and who's going to go to heaven and who's going to get to go to hell. And if you're destined for one of them, then how the guy in charge can intervene on your behalf and put in a word so that you get to go to the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
It's like,
Who put them in
okay.
charge?
Listen, it's make it up as you go. And if it sounds good, we'll stick with it. That's what it feels like happened whenever it happened. If this works, we'll go with it.
Well, you went to seminary, and you went to the actual seminary where you go all the time, and there's classes and structure. And I have been through ministerial and degree programs and so forth, not nearly to the same level of structure. But I would guess the same thing happened or didn't happen for both of us, which is that there was not a moment along the course of the training where you suddenly felt like, oh, you know what? Now I could absolve somebody of their sins and put in a word so they're not going to go to hell. They're going to go to heaven instead. Was there ever that like light switch moment for you?
Where I thought I could help them to go to heaven and not
where
hell.
suddenly you knew that you were the one who was going to be able to intervene on behalf of somebody who's bound for hell and get into heaven instead.
No. And
Okay.
and I think that I'm not a good representative.
Were there classmates of yours who said, "Oh, you know what? After
Hey,
after class
yes.
number 7, now I can do it."
Absolutely. But let me, I remember thinking, oh, this is not going to work. But I'll tell you this, though. I remember it was around when I was in high school, and that was when freedom was a big deal. It was coming through in everything. And there were, and I'm going to say guys, because it was pretty much guys talking back then. And they said, there is no hell. And I'll never forget what I felt like that. Like, what do you say? There's no hell because I'm living hell right here on earth. That made sense. And they talked about it. And, you know, it's the last poets and all of those guys that were highly enlightened while the rest of us little church kids were trying to figure out what they were saying. But I'm listening, and I said, you know, you're right. Because I know about a little bit of hell that happens at my dinner table every time my parents start screaming about whose religion is right. That's hell.
Yeah.
But I always wanted, I'll be honest though, I always wanted to be taught so I believed what I was supposed to believe. And, you know, I'm not saying that I was this enlightened little kid. I wasn't. I just had some exposure, I'd say. And I wanted to believe what they were teaching me in seminary, and I wanted to say all the right things so I could be a good pastor. And I would be eligible for the elevation and the promotions. And I said this. And I kept feeling like I am such a jerk. I'm like, I'm just a failure at this. And I just gave up and said, listen, I'm just going for broke. You know, I'm just being me and try not to say too much.
Well, you made it work. You kept on leaving denominations, and they kept inviting you into other ones.
Listen, you know, there was criticism in that because, you know, you can't make up your mind. You don't know where you want to be. And I'm thinking, you're right, because this ain't working here. But I have such a heart for imprisonment, I think I would call it. And the necessity, or let's say the beauty of life, and let's use the word heaven if that's what people like. The heavenliness of life is in freedom from all of this stuff that's been laid on you, and without question, there's no validity to it. Minimal rational reason will tell you this is not cool. So I see how that can keep you imprisoned in a way that's not healthy mentally and then physically, and, you know, so, and on and on. And you wouldn't think that your belief system had that effect and can cause, has such a ripple effect. But it does. It does. And that's what gets me all fired up sometimes, because I have, my health is very good. It's like pretty exceptional. And I'm so grateful for that. But I know that there are others my same age and less that are not experiencing that kind of, blissfulness, let's say, or heaven. And it is, I can trace it. It could be a lot of things. I'm not saying it's just this, but the frustration of bad religion, religious trauma and all that takes its toll on your life and your dreams and how you function and what, it just takes your life away. And I'm going to say this and I'm shut up, but I do remember when I was in the church where I was divorced, and I kept thinking, I got to get out of this. I got to get out of this. And here's what did it for me. I'll be honest, I was so angry one time after service, and I walked out and I said, you will not take my life from me. You will not take my life. And I don't know where that thought came from, but that's what it does. It's what it does. And how can you live after somebody takes the privilege of freedom away from you, or you give them the power to do that? Yeah. So, taking back your power, maybe because I'm a kid of the liberation movement that came. I'm a Helen Reddy kid. That was my, my theme song. I loved it. I didn't know that it was so offensive. I thought it was great, but it's in my soul now. And when I see things and feel things, I'm thinking, no, you can't you can't give away your power to be who you are to an ideology that is to someone else's benefit. Mm-hmm. But who's going to, that's it. I said I was going to say this short. That's it.
Okay. And there you go. Perhaps what we've done is loop back around to what is hell.
Yeah.
Being encouraged, convinced, or otherwise motivated to give away our power, to allow ourselves to be immersed in hell, because somebody else said that we should be there. Mm-hmm. So, and then that's the opposite of what New Thought is all about, and the power in practical prayer is that it's all about oneness. There is one divine power and presence, and if there's hell anywhere, it's everywhere, and we're in it. If there's heaven anywhere, it's everywhere, and we're in it. And there are stories of people who are living their best life and everything is wonderful, and then suddenly there is a natural disaster or an attack, and everything goes to hell. And there are other people who find themselves in a war zone or a concentration camp, and they not only survive, but they make a spiritual breakthrough and become so much more than they had been previously. And you can't point to the war zone or the concentration camp and say that's hell. And you can't point to the life before the destruction and say that's heaven, because it's all subject to change, and it's all subject to our perspective and the experience that we have as we're going through it.
Exactly. There are times when I'll tell my story, then I hear myself tell my story, and I'll say, you know what, you should really be ashamed, because this compared to the other thing is nothing. And I'll sit with that for a moment and say, well, you know what? This was the hell that I went through to make me understand that was what it took to make me understand it. And I don't get into the judgment of my story's worse than yours. I will say that I keep in mind that even the story that I have in many ways is nothing compared to others. But what that does is position me to talk about a strong belief in coming through your story and taking your power back as energetically as anybody else could. So it's not really comparing, who had the worst tragedy in their life or whose trauma was the worst. Trauma is trauma. And mine was mine. And, it doesn't matter if you don't want to wake up in the morning. Does it matter why? It doesn't.
Right.
So, yeah. So it's like a lot of moving parts to this. But I think, I'm into Rumi, so sometimes my thoughts go back to Rumi when he talks about love so much. And I didn't like that when I first read it. I didn't like that because it felt like it was just this is not strong enough. But when you think about the reality and what it is to love someone or act from a place of love, that's the strongest place you can do it, because you can offer the lifeline and gently with love help the other person take it. And so, yeah. Enough from me.
Is
on
it
that
possible that heaven and hell are two sides of the same coin?
That's very interesting. Yeah. I think that if you're going to use it as a metaphor, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's
like light and dark. You have to have dark in order for there to be light, right?
Yeah. Let's take another break, and while we're listening to this, let's ponder the possibility of a one-sided coin.
Get inspiration in an instant. God calls are the gentle and uplifting moment of truth to help you remember that the bright light of God's love is shining right now as you.
It's your God Call with Reverend Bill.
Start your 2-week free trial today, and you'll get a phone call 4 times a week from Reverend Bill with an uplifting half-minute message filled with insight, wisdom, story, and fun.
Let your light shine.
You can answer the call to listen to it live or let it go to voicemail so you can hear it later. After the free trial, your subscription is just $5.95 a month. The details are at godcall.org. God calls are disruptive, intentionally.
Whenever you write something, put on a gold star.
They take you away from your routine to remind you about the truth of who you really are. They come at random times between 8:15 a.m. and 6 p.m., so you won't be expecting them. And somehow, the message is exactly what you need to hear at the time.
Magic is loose in the world.
It's a moment of motivation in the middle of your day. Find out more and start your 2-week free trial now at godcall.org.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony, and you know what? It's got serious.
You mean talk about heaven and hell got serious? Go figure.
Yeah, it did. to me.
And where we left off before the break was
Here's what I found.
the notion of a one-sided coin.
Mm-hmm.
Heaven and hell are two sides of the same coin. And it's about perspective, because we have had the experience of feeling like we're in heaven. And we've had the experience of feeling like we're in hell. And it's the thing they have in common is us. That is the experience that we're having. So the question becomes, if I am looking at my experience and it feels like hell, what's it going to take to transform that? If this were suddenly to become heavenly, what would happen? How would it feel? How would it look? What would the change be? And not just to say, oh, well, see, God up there in the clouds needs to decide that it's going to be better, and then suddenly, it's going to be the angels playing harps again. If that's what heaven is, then yeah. And there's a moving van for all the hellish stuff, to drop off the harps. Whatever that means to you. So let's do a prayer about inviting in that shift in, not just in perspective, because it's not just how we're looking at it. When we flip a coin and it's heads or tails, something changes. They're deciding who's going to kick off at the Super Bowl. Something happens. It comes up heads, it comes up tails. There's a difference. But the coin has both sides, and both are possible. So as we are experiencing one or the other, there's the possibility of being okay with that and allowing ourselves to come into alignment with the experience that we're having. Or, as Ernest Holmes encourages us to look a fact in the face and know something better. we can understand that there is another side to this coin. There is another possibility in this experience, and set our intention and allow our consciousness to come into alignment with whatever that transition or change is, and then partner with that infinite power to create that newness in our lives. We don't reach out and flip over the coin. We simply understand that the way that we are in relationship to that good, bad, up, down, dark, light, warm, cold, is subject to change. And we invite in that feeling of more warmth. Or if we're afraid of hell, we invite in an experience of less warmth. And since it's all possible, the experience that we're seeking is possible as well. So to make that work, we can close our eyes or go to a soft focus or do whatever it is we do to turn away from the world around us so we can open up to the awareness of that infinite creative power, that divine presence within. And I say it's within because it's everything. It's everyone, it's everywhere, it's every moment, it's every place, it's every particle, it's every planet, it's everything. Is that one divine God essence expressed in a unique and individual way. There is no spot where God is not. There is nothing that is not that divine presence. Everything is God's divine love unfolding in its own way. And that everything includes me and each one within the sound of my voice, and all of the experiences and activities that we're involved in, and all of the unfolding of events that we're engaged in. So as we look at a circumstance or a situation and we understand and evaluate, this is hellish for me. This is not what I desire. This is not bringing glee and joy and harmony and uplift, prosperity and wellness and comfort, and equilibrium into my life. I choose something different. I choose an experience that's more balanced, that's more harmonious, that's more loving, that's more prosperous, that's more comfortable. It's more pleasant. Or if I've been bored and at loose ends, perhaps that transformation is something more exciting, something different, something new, something fresh, something challenging. It's not the activity that makes it heaven or hell. It's about the perspective and the way that we are engaging with it. So what I am inviting now is that harmony and balance and alignment between our desires, that which brings us a feeling and experience of uplift and joy and balance. And the experiences unfolding around us and for us and through us and with us that allow that experience to happen. So that's what I'm inviting now. Not turning away from something bad or hoping for something good, but simply allowing that balance, that love, that goodness to unfold in a way that brings more and more of that love for each of us. So that's what I'm claiming. And I'm so grateful to know that this infinite creative power that creates everything is creating this newness now for us and through us. It's creating it as us. We are the instruments through which that goodness is flowing. We are full participants in this creative process. And the good is at hand. And it's different for each of us. And it's completely unstoppable. And it's happening now. And so with gratitude for all this good, I speak this word and release it into that creative law. And I know it's already saying yes. This good is already happening now. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
Therein, the Practical Prayer Podcast, episode number 178.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Now, did the Heaven and Hell episode go where you thought it was going to go, or were there surprises for you?
It went where it was supposed to go.
No surprises?
I can't say that. It just went it went the way it was supposed to go. It did. The location thing, the here's heaven and here's where hell is, and the difference. I mean, it's gonna get 30 seconds at best. You can't milk any more out of it.
Yeah, that's it. The first part is really easy. And I'm
So
fascinated. I'm trying to imagine what your classmates were like when they realized, oh, I can tell people if they're going to go to heaven or hell.
It was brutal.
I can imagine how that was for you.
It was brutal. My, my husband would say to me sometime, look, just don't say anything. Okay,
Just don't say anything.
just don't say anything.
Pretend you're not here.
Uh,
That's funny.
it were times when I would say things from time to time, and people were drawn to it. And it's pretty easy to shake the ones off that come for criticism. It's just easy because you take a couple of steps, academic steps up, and you can knock off the opposers. So that's not a big deal. But then there were those people that really, really, really liked me a whole lot, but were afraid to embrace me too much because then that had implications in their own world. And I understood that. So what do you have, secret friends? Right? One of those kind of deals. So that was pretty good. My journey through this has been really very pleasant, regardless of how the struggle might be. And I'm using that word carefully, recognizing it may not be so easy for others. And mine was pleasant because I'm not a genius. I just had, like I said, I had a few breadcrumbs to chew on beforehand, so it was okay. But it's just not that simple for other people. And you're saying I'm handing you freedom. I'm not telling you you're going to hell, because there's a lot of that. You don't tell people about their sin, and you don't tell them that they're going to hell, and therefore you are. That's that conversation. But the other part is, how do you help people experience? People talk about, you say bliss, okay, but I don't want you to think that I mean less of it. How do I help you experience heaven? What would that be like? But you can't have both. Mm-hmm. And so what are you willing to give up? And that's pretty much, that's the question. Like, if you just really need to have this hell thing, then I'll see you later.
It's bringing up a whole bunch of questions for me. Like, if somebody finds themselves in a hellish experience and it suddenly becomes a little bit more heavenly, that's a gradual transformation. At what point does it stop being hell?
As soon as you realize there's a way out.
Okay.
Because there's that light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing, and there's a way out. But I know how to use scripture, and I say that respectfully, anybody. I know how to use scripture to paint a bigger picture, shall we say. And if I use that, you can't deny it because it's there. And the picture that I paint at times is not disrespectful. It's just saying, can you imagine this? And that's when you start, I think, that's when you start feeling heaven. But what you're really feeling is a little bit of freedom from where you were, and that thing that holds you in place from being the best you can be, even. Because we all can talk about those things that people have said that have caused us to, the imposter syndrome and, low self-esteem, all that stuff. We learn that in church, and I think it's not intentional, but that's what happens.
Yep.
And even something as innocent as who gets to be the president of such and such an organization for 100 years, that means nobody else gets an opportunity because I maybe didn't measure up. You don't know what people are thinking in the pew. Right. I can't get that. And so there's somebody that grows up with that, and they go out the door to live their life, but they're taking that wrong message with them, and it affects you the rest of your life. So that's kind of how I see a lot of this.
Okay.
And that's why I love New Thought, because it tells you can be free. And there's no end to this.
And I'm
there's
getting
no
the
end to your
suspicion
freedom.
that you were had this perspective even when you were in traditional religion, which was empowering and probably a little bit confusing for the people around you.
That would be a nice way to put it. I mean, I was actually told I'm going to hell, right, because of that. And you're doing the course on Jesus, right? Is
Yep.
that okay? So that has
Healing
got
Like
to
Jesus.
be that's got to be a major thing. And I'm saying that, you know what, Jesus, and this is before I formally understood Jesus through New Thought. I'm saying Jesus is saying this. You're not taking the whole. You're just looking at this little piece of it. But let's listen to what Jesus says is the whole big perspective of things that Jesus might be talking about. And now I'm going to hell for sure now, because I'm not portraying Jesus the way I was told. And really, I mean, you could tell the same story. How much you gonna tell the same story without, you know what? Oh, come on. I mean, God is creative, right? God is creative.
That's true.
We
That's
are,
true.
this is my favorite thing. We are the manifestation of God's imagination. I love that. I don't
Yep.
know where it came from. I said it in church. I got reprimanded for it, but I don't care. That's what I believe. So here's this God, right? This God that is so mega creative, and he can't come up with a better story than this, more to the story than this, he, she, it, whatever it is. That's it? Don't think so. So,
See,
Yeah.
and I'm still stuck on like the Jesus story, who started out being a nice Jewish boy, and then got in real trouble with the authorities, but his mom still thought he could walk on water.
But, yeah, we could do this for on into the night.
Yeah, let's.
There's so, but it's not bashing, right? It's just
no. It's
let's-
there's stories and there's observations and there's stuff.
we're allowed to think.
Well, yeah, we're required to think. I mean, we're going to be thinking anyway. We might as well make it be something.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let us wrap this up. It's almost 2:00 Eastern Time. Thank you to the folks who are listening in, watching on New Thought Media Network. Maxine gave us a comment, likes to listen whenever possible, so it's wonderful to have you here. For the folks who are on New Thought Media Network watching the replay of this, apparently people like to watch at 1 1/4 speed because it takes less time. Efficiency. So if you're listening to this later, you can go to bethelight.com, be-the-light.com, the website, and put in a question or comment or recommendation there. And thank you for joining us, and we're going to be back here again next Monday. Thanks, Carol.
See ya.